The honeymoon, the husband, and the silence of cabin. 8024. The last photo uploaded to the couple's travel blog, dated June 14th, 2005, is a masterclass in curated joy. In the frame, captured on a 5-megapixel Canon PowerShot, Elena, 28, and Mark Vance, 30, are standing on the promenade deck of the Azure Sovereign. The port of Miami blurs in the background, a haze of heat and steel cranes. Elena is wearing a white sundress that flutters in the slipstream, her hand resting possessively on Mark's chest. Mark, wearing oversized aviators and a linen shirt unbuttoned one notch too low, is grinning at something off camera, perhaps a passing waiter, or the promise of the open ocean. The caption, typed out in the default font of their Blogspot page, reads, "Forever starts now." Sent from the internet cafe. 72 hours later, Mark Vance would be missing, presumed lost at sea. 4 days after that, the "forever Elena promised" would be traded for a sentence of 25 years to life. But on that Tuesday afternoon, as the ship's horn bellowed its deep, baritone departure signal, they were simply the golden couple of Deck 8. They were the envy of the retirees and the aspiration of the college kids. They were beautiful, successful, and violently in love. According to witness statements collected by the FBI, the cracks didn't appear gradually. They didn't splinter over years of mortgage payments and cold dinners. They appeared with the sudden, jagged violence of a hull breach. The Azure Sovereign is a floating city, a behemoth of consumption designed to keep 3,000 souls fed, intoxicated, and distracted. It is a place where reality is suspended. For Mark Vance, a regional sales director for a rising tech firm, this environment was a playground. He was a man who thrived on attention, the kind of guy who befriended bartenders within minutes and bought rounds of shots for strangers. Elena was different. A junior archivist for a museum in Chicago, she was described by friends as meticulous, intense, and deeply private. Their courtship had been a whirlwind. 6 months from the first date to the altar. Friends of the couple later testified that Elena seemed anxious about the marriage, often making jokes about Mark being out of her league. "She gripped him tight," said Sarah Miller, Elena's maid of honor, in a deposition. "Like she was afraid if she let go, he'd just float away like a balloon." On the first night of the cruise, Tuesday, the Vances dined at Le Breton, the ship's upscale French bistro. Their server, Jean-Luc, recalled them ordering the Chateau Margaux. "The gentleman was loud, happy," Jean-Luc told investigators. "He was talking to the table next to them. 2 young women from university. He was making them laugh. The wife, she was slicing her steak very slowly. She did not look at the women. She looked only at his hands." By Wednesday, the tension had migrated from the dining room to the pool deck. It was 1 p.m. The sun was beating down on the mid-Atlantic. Mark had entered a belly flop contest organised by the cruise director. He was intoxicated. Toxicology reports later estimated his BAC at this time would have been around 0.12. He was performing for the crowd, flexing, laughing, and high-fiving a bikini-clad events coordinator named Jessica. Elena was watching from a lounge chair, hidden behind a massive sun hat and dark glasses. According to a passenger seated next to her, Elena wasn't reading the paperback in her lap. She was vibrating, the passenger, a retired teacher named Mrs. Gable, said. She was staring at her husband and that girl. I asked her if she wanted a drink, and she snapped at me. She said, "I don't need a drink, I need a leash." That evening, the first public altercation occurred. In the ship's casino, Mark lost $500 at the roulette table. He laughed it off, asking Elena for the room keycard to get more cash. Witnesses say Elena refused. Mark grabbed her wrist. Playfully, he might have claimed, but forcefully enough that a security guard took a step forward. "Don't be a buzzkill, Elle," Mark was heard saying. "It's the honeymoon." "Exactly," Elena hissed, pulling her arm back. "It's the honeymoon. Look at me, Mark. Look at me." He didn't. He looked back at the wheel. Elena turned and walked out. Mark stayed at the table for another 2 hours. Thursday, June 16th, 2005. The night of the Captain's Gala. This is the narrative fulcrum. The passengers donned their formal wear. The atrium was filled with the sound of a string quartet, covering classic rock ballads. Elena wore a floor-length emerald gown. Mark was in a tuxedo that he complained was too tight across the shoulders. They posed for the professional ship photographers on the grand staircase. In the printed proofs, released during the trial, Mark's eyes are glazed. Eleanor's smile doesn't reach her eyes. Her jaw is set so hard the muscles are visible beneath the skin. They had dinner at the captain's table, a privilege bought with a premium suite package. Captain Hargrove later noted that the couple seemed frosty. She was monitoring his wine intake, Hargrove stated. Every time the sommelier approached, she put her hand over his glass. He removed it. It was uncomfortable. At 10:45 p.m., the couple was seen at the Blue Velvet Jazz Lounge. Mark was speaking with the same events coordinator, Jessica, from the pool deck. It was innocent conversation. Jessica was asking about their shore excursion for the next day in Nassau. Elena didn't see it that way. Witnesses say Elena approached the bar, took Mark's martini glass, and deliberately poured the contents onto the floor between Mark and Jessica. "We're leaving," she said. Mark's face went crimson. The humiliation was public. He grabbed Elena's arm, hard. "You're crazy," he whispered, but in the quiet lull of the jazz set, it carried. "You're actually psycho." They left the lounge at 11:12 p.m. Surveillance footage from the hallway of Deck 8, grainy black and white tape, recorded at a low frame rate, shows them walking toward cabin 8024. Mark is walking ahead, loosening his tie, stumbling slightly. Elena is 5 paces behind him. Her posture is rigid. They enter the cabin at 11:15 p.m. The door closes. This is where the public record ends, and the forensic reconstruction begins. Cabin 8024 was a grand suite. It featured a king-sized bed, a small sitting area with a glass coffee table, and a private balcony overlooking the ocean. According to Elena's initial statement to ship security, Mark had come into the room, changed into casual clothes, and announced he was going back out to the casino to win back his dignity. She claimed he left at 11:45 p.m. and she went to sleep. But the walls of a cruise ship are thin, and the neighbours in 8026 heard otherwise. "It started as shouting," testified David Ross, the neighbour. "He was yelling about her being suffocating. He called her a prison warden. He said he made a mistake." Then the sounds changed. It sounded like furniture moving, a heavy thud, then something that sounded like wet laundry hitting the floor, then silence. Inside the room, the argument had escalated into a physical altercation. Based on blood spatter patterns found later, Mark had shoved Elena onto the bed. He had turned to pour himself a drink from the complimentary crystal decanter set on the vanity. As he turned his back, Elena grabbed the heavy glass ice bucket, solid, thick-bottomed crystal. She didn't scream. She didn't warn him. She swung the bucket with the full force of her adrenaline and rage. It connected with the back of Mark's skull, just behind the right ear. Mark Vance collapsed forward, his head striking the corner of the glass coffee table on the way down. The combination of the blow and the fall was catastrophic. He lay on the geometric carpet, bleeding profusely from a laceration to the temporal artery and a depressed skull fracture. He didn't die immediately. The medical examiner suggested he likely lived for 3 to 5 minutes, unable to move, unable to speak, as his brain swelled. Elena Vance stood over him, This is the moment that separates a crime of passion from something colder. A person in pure shock might call the ship's emergency line. They might scream for help. They might try to compress the wound. Elena did none of those things. She checked his pulse. She found it thready and fading. And then she sat on the edge of the bed and waited for it to stop. At 11:35 p.m., Mark Vance was dead. Elena was now alone in a 400-square-foot room with a body covered in blood on a ship surrounded by thousands of people and millions of gallons of water. Her actions over the next 4 hours were chillingly pragmatic. First, the balcony. It was a moonless night. The ocean below was a churning black void. The drop from deck 8 is roughly 80 feet to the waterline. Elena, despite her slender frame, was fueled by hysteria. She dragged Mark's body, 185 pounds of dead weight, through the sliding glass doors. This was the most physically demanding part of the night. Friction burns were later found on her heels and palms. She managed to lever his torso over the teak railing. With a final grunting shove, she tipped him over. There was no splash audible over the roar of the ship's wake. He was just gone. Swallow by the Atlantic. Next, the cleanup. This was where Elena's profession as an archivist, someone trained to handle delicate materials and organize chaos, manifested in a macabre way. She stripped the bedsheets, which had minor spatter. She used the towels to soak up the blood on the carpet. She used the complementary shampoo and body wash to scrub the fibres. It wouldn't pass a forensic test, but to the naked eye in the dim mood lighting of the cabin, it looked clean. She took Mark's tuxedo, his shoes, the towels and the bloody sheets. She packed them into her large Samsonite suitcase. At 2:15 a.m., the hallway camera captures Elena leaving the room. She is wearing a hoodie and sweatpants. She is dragging the large suitcase. She looks calm. She took the elevator to deck 3, the open promenade deck, usually deserted at this hour. She walked to the aft railing, a secluded spot near the crew access stairs. She opened the suitcase. One by one, she threw the items into the dark wake. The tuxedo, the shoes, the towels. She kept the suitcase. She returned to the room at 2:55 a.m. She showered. She put on her silk pajamas. She lay in the bed where her husband had died hours earlier, and she set an alarm for 8 a.m. Friday morning, the ship docked in Nassau. Elena called the guest services desk at 8:30 a.m. Her voice was trembling, pitch perfect in its concern. "My husband, he didn't come back last night. I'm worried." The machinery of the ship's security team ground into action. A missing person protocol is a nightmare for cruise lines. They searched the casino. They paged him over the intercom. "Mr. Mark Vance, please contact guest services immediately." Elena played the role of the distraught wife with terrifying aptitude. She sat in the security office clutching a tissue, her eyes red-rimmed. "He was drunk," she told the security chief, a South African man named Dion. "He said he was going to the casino. I told him not to. We fought. I went to bed. Oh, God, did he fall? Did he fall over?" She planted the seed immediately, the accident. The drunk husband, leaning too far over a railing. But Dion was suspicious. "The railings are chest high, Mrs. Vance," he said. "It is very hard to fall by accident." The ship remained docked. The Bahamian police boarded. Because the ship was US, flagged a rarity, and the passengers were US citizens, the FBI was contacted, though their arrival would take time. The investigation began in the room. At first glance, cabin 8024 looked pristine, but the housekeeping staff, interviewed later, mentioned a strange smell. "Like bleach and iron," one maid said. The break in the case didn't come from high-tech forensics, at least not initially. It came from the digital footprint. Mark's keycard. On modern cruise ships, even in 2005, your keycard is your life. It opens your door, tracks your onboard spending, and logs your movement. Ship security pulled the logs from the server. Mark Vance keycard entered cabin 8024 at 11:15 p.m. Mark Vance keycard, no exit recorded. If he left to go to the casino, Deon asked Elena, how did he leave the room without opening the door? Elena faltered. Maybe the door didn't latch. Maybe he didn't close it all the way. And the cameras, Deon pressed. The CCTV shows you entering together. It shows you leaving at 2:15 a.m. with a suitcase. It does not show him leaving. Elena went pale. She hadn't accounted for the hallway cameras. She assumed they were only in the elevators or the casino. I took some laundry to the laundry room, she stammered. I was angry. I was cleaning. At 2 a.m., you took a suitcase of laundry? The FBI Evidence Response Team arrived via helicopter by late Friday afternoon. The ship was held in port. The honeymoon was over, the crime scene was active, and they brought Luminol. To the naked eye, the carpet in cabin 8024 was beige with a teal geometric pattern. Under the blue light of the chemical reagent, the room lit up like a star map. There was a massive glowing pool of chemiluminescence near the foot of the bed. There were drag marks leading to the balcony. There were handprints on the glass door, handprints that had been wiped down, but the blood protein remained in the microscopic scratches of the glass. The railing on the balcony told the rest of the story. A microscopic chip of paint was missing, and a smudge of tissue was found caught in a screw head on the outer side of the banister. DNA testing would later confirm it was Mark Vance's blood and tissue. When confronted with the glowing blue evidence photos, Elena Vance didn't cry. She didn't ask for a lawyer immediately. She asked for water. Then she looked at the FBI agent and said he was going to leave me. Not just the room, he was going to leave me. The body of Mark Vance was never recovered. The currents in the Providence Channel are strong and the depth drops to thousands of feet quickly. Elena's defense team tried to argue self-defense. They painted Mark as an abusive drunk, a man who had attacked her first. They claimed she pushed him in a panic. He hit his head, and she, in a fugue state of trauma, tried to hide the body. The jury didn't buy it. The fugue state didn't explain the methodical scrubbing of the carpet. It didn't explain the disposal of the clothes. It didn't explain the suitcase. It didn't explain the 3 hours she waited before disposing of the evidence. The prosecution argued that the disposal of the body was not panic, but a calculated attempt to erase a human being. They argued that Elena Vance was a woman who treated her life like the archives she managed. Everything had a place, and if something didn't fit the narrative, it was removed. On October 14, 2006, Elena Vance was found guilty of second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. She was sentenced to 28 years in federal prison. The Azure Sovereign still sails the Miami-Nassau route. Cabin 8024 has been refurbished. The carpet has been replaced. The mattress is new. Passengers who stay there now usually don't know the history. They stand on the balcony, drinking champagne, looking out at the endless hypnotic blue water, unaware that 80 feet below them, a honeymoon ended in the dark. In her final statement to the court, Elena Vance offered a chilling glimpse into the mind of a woman who killed for control. "I just wanted everything to be perfect," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "We were supposed to be happy. If he hadn't ruined it, we would have been." She spoke of the murder not as a tragedy, but as a failed correction, a stain she couldn't quite scrub out.